It started with a phone call, a wrong number at 2:17 a.m. The ringtone cut through the silence, pulling me from sleep as I scrambled for my phone. "Hello?" I mumbled, still groggy and irritated. At first, there was nothing but silence. Then, a faint noise like static buzzing through the line. I was ready to hang up when I heard it. A whisper, barely audible, saying, "You left the door unlocked." A chill crawled down my spine. I glanced at my bedroom door, then toward the hallway beyond. Every part of me screamed it was just a prank, yet the unease lingered. I hung up, locked my phone, and lay staring at the ceiling until morning. The next day, I tried to brush off the incident. Sleep deprivation messes with your head, I told myself. But when I returned home from work, something felt wrong. My apartment had a strange, heavy air, as if someone had been there. I checked every room, bathroom, closet, even under the bed. Nothing. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That night, it happened again. The same number, the same whisper. "Why didn't you lock it?" This time, I didn't respond. I just sat there, gripping the phone, my pulse pounding in my ears. Before I could hang up, the whisper came again, sharper now, almost a hiss. "I'm already here." I bolted out of bed and checked every lock in the apartment. The front door was secure. The windows were shut tight. I even looked through the peephole. Empty hallway. Just as I was convincing myself it was another prank, the power cut out. The darkness was suffocating. I reached for my phone, using its light to navigate. The glow illuminated the edges of my small living room, casting warped shadows. That's when I saw a single wet footprint on the hardwood floor. Barefoot, human. I backed into the corner, my hands trembling as I dialed 911. The call didn't connect. No signal, just static. Then, from somewhere behind me, I heard the soft creak of a floorboard. I spun around, phone light flashing wildly. Nothing. But the air had changed. It was heavy, cold, and carrying a faint, metallic smell. Blood. I must have blacked out because the next thing I knew, I was waking up in my bed, drenched in sweat. My phone lay on the nightstand, its screen blank. The apartment appeared normal, almost too normal, as if nothing had ever happened. Except for one thing. On my bathroom mirror, written in a streaky red smear, were the words, "You should have locked it." I moved out the next day. I didn't care about the deposit, my things, or the fact that I had nowhere to go. It didn't matter. No matter where I go, the phone calls follow. Last night, the whisper was sharper than before. It wasn't a question anymore. It was a promise. "I'll see you soon." It began with a sound of soft, persistent tapping that echoed through my apartment in the dead of night. At first, I thought it was the radiator or a branch brushing against the window. But when I checked, there was nothing. The tapping always seemed to come from the direction I wasn't facing. I live alone, so I tried to dismiss it. Maybe the building was settling, or maybe I was overthinking it. But then, strange things started happening. One evening, I came home to find my front door slightly ajar. I knew I had locked it. I always double-check. Inside, nothing appeared out of place, but the air felt wrong, heavy, as if someone had been there, leaving behind an invisible trace of their presence. A few nights later, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of faint footsteps. My heart pounded as I lay frozen in bed, straining to hear more. They stopped just outside my bedroom door. Summoning my courage, I turned on the light and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but I noticed something strange. On the wooden floor were faint, wet footprints. I didn't own a pet, and no one else had a key to my apartment. The real terror began when I started receiving calls from an unknown number. The first time I hesitated to answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I said. Silence. Then, just before I hung up, a whisper, "You're not alone." I froze. The voice was neither male nor female, and it sounded close, as if someone was speaking directly into my ear. The calls became more frequent, always at odd hours. Each time, the whispers grew more menacing. Last night, I woke up to find my phone on the floor, even though I always leave it on my nightstand. When I picked it up, the screen was lit, displaying a photo. It was me sleeping. The angle was from the foot of my bed. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, and now every shadow feels alive. I've started hearing breathing that isn't mine, and I'm certain I saw a figure standing in the corner of my room last night. I don't know how much longer I can stay here. Rachel and Eric had envisioned a peaceful escape. They rented a remote cabin in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, hoping to leave behind the stress of urban life. The promise of tranquility, fresh air, and no cell service was exactly what they both craved. The cabin had a rustic charm, sitting on a hill with an expansive view of the forest. Their first day was ideal hiking, cooking over an open fire, and laughing together as if it had been ages. But as the sun sank beneath the horizon, an unsettling quiet settled over the woods. No birds, no insects, only silence. "Did you hear that?" Rachel asked, pausing mid-sentence during their card game. "Hear what?" Eric replied, shuffling the deck. She paused. The sound had been faint, almost like her name being called, but muffled, as if heard through water. "Nothing," she murmured, dismissing it with a shrug. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. The cabin, surrounded by dense trees, felt too isolated. The silence was oppressive, pressing against her ears like a weight. Then, just as she was starting to drift off, she heard it again, a faint, warbled version of her name. "Eric," she whispered, shaking him awake. "Did you hear that?" Groggy and annoyed, Eric listened for a moment before dismissing it as wind. But Rachel was sure. It hadn't been the wind. It was something else. The next morning, Eric seemed distant, brushing off Rachel's concerns as paranoia. He went fishing at the nearby stream while she stayed behind, trying to shake off the unease. She spent the day reading and tidying, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. By dusk, Eric still hadn't returned. Rachel ventured to the stream, calling his name, but the only reply was her own voice echoing back, distorted and hollow. "Eric," she yelled again, her voice trembling. "Eric," the echo replied, mimicking her tone but twisting it into something eerie and unfamiliar. Her heart raced as she spun around. The woods, once serene, now seemed alive. Shadows shifted unnaturally, and the air buzzed with an unexplainable energy. She stumbled back to the cabin, locking every door and window. Night fell, and Eric still hadn't returned. Just as Rachel was about to call for help, a knock came at the door. Relief flooded her. "Eric," she called, running to the door. When she opened it, Eric stood there, but something was wrong. His eyes were vacant, his expression slack. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, though his lips barely moved. His voice was layered, as if two people were speaking at once. "What happened?" she stammered, stepping back. Before he could respond, his body jerked unnaturally, and he let out a guttural scream. Then, without warning, he bolted into the woods. Rachel stayed still. She slammed the door shut, retreating in a panic as her mind spun wildly. Outside, the forest erupted with sound, an eerie repetition of her name, distorted and echoing back to her from the darkness. By morning, Rachel had vanished. The locals discovered the cabin left in disarray, furniture overturned, and the walls marred with strange scratches, words in a language no one could understand. Some believe the forest claimed her, as it had claimed others in the past. If you stand at the edge of the woods at night, you might hear the faint echoes of her frantic cries. But beware, if you call back, the forest will learn your name. And once it knows your name, it will never let you go.